Howdy YouTube neighbors. Today we're going to do something a tad different, and I'm going to review the Equestrian clan fan-made mod for Monster Train. As always, credit and thanks go to ThreeFishies for the custom clan, which you can find now on the Steam Workshop. So I'm doing this review because, honestly, I'm blown away at the depth of this mod, and I mean that in every context. Depth of design, depth of content, depth of bug testing, of which I've found very little, if any, and depth of theme. And it honestly baffles me that this mod isn't rated higher and more downloaded, and that there's not much in the way of YouTube content for it, because I think it's DLC level quality. So in adding the clan, you also get new mutators and even new expert challenges. You get new artifacts and even a new cavern event. Now, I suspect the reason for this is probably the subject matter. It's My Little Ponies after all. And the intersection of people who play a roguelike deck builder about demons and hell and fans of magical friendship ponies, well, it's probably very small. I don't know, perhaps the mod would have done better with a unique character focus, but at the end of the day, it's a moot point. There's only one reason that one puts in the kind of work that ThreeFishies has obviously put into this mod without any expectation of compensation or remuneration, and, well, that reason is love. This is clearly a work of love, and that love, it shines through in every aspect of the gameplay. So let's talk about that gameplay some. If I were to summarize the gameplay for this clan, I would call it I would call it a nuclear bomb sold by IKEA. What I mean by that is you'll need to gather and assemble all the pieces for any particular explosion carefully, and if you do, your victory is all but guaranteed. But if any of those pieces are missing, there's no helping you. To that end, it rewards skill and gameplay for those who can evaluate the foundation which either champion creates and to build upon that foundation properly. It's certainly not perfect in any aspect. For example, as of this video, Equestrian units completely ignore the buffs from Keeper of Echoes' Inspire trigger. But it's far more solid than I ever expected from a fan-made custom clan, and I'm truly impressed. The general theme is small floor-wide buffs that are better the more units you have on the floor, and the clan certainly has the tools to make that powerful. So, let's go into the specifics of the mod. And we'll start with the champions. Maria Lee is the default champion, and in general, she wants to get ponies on the floor with her. She basically represents the primary theme of the clan. Of the three, let's reset them all to one here. Of the three, I believe I enjoy her tutor form the most. Because freezing units in your hand is a novel and interesting mechanic which brings a strategic element to the clan that you won't find in any other clan. By leaving units in your hand, you get the benefit of scaling and later on reductions in cost and size, but at the cost of clogging up your hand for your initial draws in the early game. I had a lot of fun with this, and that initial scaling opens up some options you wouldn't otherwise consider. Tutor starts off good, and it only gets better. I have nothing but good things to say about Tutor. So Coach, on the other hand, Coach is kind of a cross between Predator Wildington and Tethys, in that she provides a powerful buff to the entire floor, but she herself is fragile. So I like that ThreeFishies solves the Tethys problem by giving her armor. Now, even at level 3, it's only armor 20. It's not much armor, but it's enough to give you time to find your survivability solutions, and it's not like you don't know that you're going to have them. It's, once again, like playing Tethys. You either throw Tethys away, or you find a way to keep Tethys alive. You're not going to want to throw Maria Lee away because she's just too good, but you will still have to find a way to keep her alive. Now, I haven't found much use for her first form that gives everybody Endless, but her second form, and then her third form, where she enchants with Quick and then finally Trample. That's practically game winning in itself if you have any kind of reasonable floor-wide scaling, which you shouldn't have any problem with in this clan. So finally there's Teacher. I haven't played Teacher much, but I was really excited to see that she generates an admittedly very fragile sweeper in the Trash Panda at level 1. Now, I was somewhat unimpressed with her second form, and we'll look at the common ponies she generates a bit later, but oh boy, that third form. Her third form guarantees that you can fill a floor with ponies and hit that 7-unit max on turn 2, 3, or 4, really at the latest, so long as you actually have banner units. Now, this unlocks the clan's powerful spells with high herd requirements. And, strangely enough, of the 3, Teacher's the only one that I had success splitting the champion. So, a Teacher 1, Tutor 2 gives you a guaranteed sweeper that you can hold in your hand and use it to scale. And it worked out for me. I really liked it. So, otherwise, with the exception of this one fringe case, Maria Lee really wants you to pick one of her vocations and stick with it. So, moving on to the Exile champion Tantabus, who I have come to understand is technically female. I've called Tantabus he several times, but I mean, who's going to tell him he's not a he? You know, I don't know. It's once again that My Little Ponies thing. I don't know My Little Ponies, and I'm evaluating this clan specifically as a bit of Monster Train DLC. So, Tantabus, she's got 3 unique paths as well that you want to go in 3 deep, but I've found that Psychosis and Lucid can actually play well together and support a split. If I were going to name a favorite Equestrian champion path overall, though, it would be Lucid. Lucid is simple and powerful. It gives you extra Ember, a large amount of health for frontline tanking, and the ability to absolutely bully Sap Seraph. Bully him mercilessly. Nightmare is pretty simple on paper too, but in execution... Anyway, in execution, she's trickier to play than you would think. Something of a cross between Spike's Fade and Imperialist Shardtail Queen. She wants to kill her own ponies to get beefy and carry a floor with multi-strike. Now, I only did 1 Nightmare run in my playthroughs, but that was the highest scoring one with some insane flying kills. I also really enjoyed Psychosis, which is strange for me, personally, because I don't generally like champions that force you into a specific playstyle, like Soul Guard specifically. And I bring Soul Guard up specifically because he, too, forces you into an incant line, if you want the champion to be of any use to you. So that being said, despite Lucid being my favorite, Psychosis was the one I probably had the most fun with for 2 reasons. First, it actually gave me a reason to invest in those high-cost starter spells that are Night Terrors. And secondly, the Equestrian clan has a surprising number of attuned spells. And that additional magic power on Incant, it goes a long way. So, let's talk about the units. Common-wise, there's not really much to speak of. Let's pull up those units. Unit, Equestrian, Common. We've already covered Trash Panda, and there's really nothing else to say about Trash Panda. He's a free sweeper. The rest... Carrot is specifically generated by Crunchy Munchy here. The rest, these 3 specifically, you're only going to get via mechanics like Teacher Maria Lee and cards that give you random ponies. These are the ponies that are generated. They exist. Let's move on. Uncommons. Come on, there you go. There's only one non-banner uncommon unit, and that's Poison Joke. On its own, so long as you can give it endless and kill it off every turn, it's a slow means of scaling. But if you have means of removing that sap, like Lucid Tannabis or resin removal out of melting, it's some pretty insane floor-wide scaling. Now, the banner units themselves are all very well balanced, and I'm honestly never unhappy to see any of them. Misty Step and Snackasmacky are going to be your two primary scalers in the banner units. They both provide a small bit of scaling to the floor every turn, and they're both good either as themselves in a unit or as an infusion. You basically, you see what you get with the infusion. Marino, she's a reliable card draw, and over time that -1 really starts to add up. Now, obviously, she can't really be your only pony unit because she doesn't scale, but she is still very good, and I'm always very glad to find a spot for her on the floor. So, Static Joy and Preeny Snuggles here are going to be your primary attackers. Static Joy is expensive only because of trample, and she is going to require investment, but with sufficient investment, she can do a lot of damage. Sadly, her essence doesn't grant trample, and armor 2 to the entire line on strike is okay, but there are much better infusions to be found in Clan. Preeny Snuggles is a unit I had a lot of fun with, particularly if I can give her Endlesser Reform, because she gains that +8/+8 every time she's summoned. As far as I know, she's also the only X-cost unit in the game, and that novelty is not nothing. Then there's Squeaky Boo Boo here. Squeaky Boo Boo is survivability to the floor, and in combination with Snackasmacky is scaling. She's also a pretty decent frontline tank if you happen to need one. So, like I said, never unhappy to see any of these banner units come up. Alright, rare units. So, of the rares, Guardian of the Gates was the one that was showcased most frequently in my 12-episode series, and there's honestly not much to say about him. He's basically a better version of Shadow Siege, and the Equestrian clan has got more tools to overcome his high ember cost and size than Umber clan has to get Shadow Siege in play. His essence is actually pretty incredible, too. If you can get it onto a social unit, or if you otherwise don't have to worry about floor space. I showed off Tavern Ace once, and she is run-winning on her own. If you can get her early enough to properly reserve her enough times, or if you can find a way to freeze her in your hand. The unit essence, once again, what you see is what you get. If you can get Permafrost on that unit, and going back to the commons, or uncommons, Squeaky Boo Boo is of note here specifically because she will give a unit Permafrost with her essence. So it's definitely not impossible to do. It's not even really that hard. And that +12 permanently adds up very, very quickly. Okay, so Jest Ember. I haven't used Jest Ember, but apparently I've seen him at least once. His slayability is weird. I don't get the slayability. I mean, I'm always happy to get Ember, don't get me wrong, but I don't quite get it. I'm not sure how you're supposed to capitalize on that. But it doesn't matter. He is a 50 power sweeper. That, I honestly, thinks for itself. Now, let's talk about his infusion, though, because his infusion is weird. +10 power and immunity to sap and ember drain. Now, the clear intent here is that this infusion is meant to give a primary unit the ability to eat herbs, like Heart's Desire over here and Poison Joke here, without having to deal with a downside. But I really have a hard time justifying that infusion when a 50 power sweeper exists. So, speaking of Heart's Desire, I never really found a proper use for it. It seems powerful to me, but somehow it really doesn't scream rare card to me. I don't know. If you've broken the game wide open with a heart's desire, please leave me a comment and tell your tale. I would love to read it. Okay, let's move on with the spells. We'll start with the commons, because that's honestly the most important. So, Mark Rosewater, designer for Magic the Gathering, he once said, let me see if I get the quote right, if your theme's not at common, it's not your theme. I'm pretty sure that's the quote. So as a much less successful game designer myself, I definitely agree. And on that note, if there's one criticism / complaint I'll make about Rising Dusk's otherwise phenomenal unofficial balance patch, it's that moving Ember Drain package cards out of common and then moving one from uncommon to rare removes Ember Drain as a theme for Umbra. In my own playthroughs of the UBP, I had great difficulty assembling any kind of Ember Drain deck with them. And despite their challenges, Umbra is my favorite clan and the one I probably know best. But that's a video for another time. So, at common, the clear theme for the Equestrian clan is strength in numbers. We've got Packed Audience, Party Invitation, and Reserves that are all about getting units together on the floor. Dress to Kill, Apple Cider, and to an extent Pastry Warfare is about protecting them, and then Time to Shine puts the Chaotic Herd into order. The only card that doesn't fit the theme here is Shenanigans, and Shenanigans honestly deserves its own discussion because it's really the closest thing I have ever seen to an auto pick in Monster Train. In terms of ping spells, it's simply unchallenged. It's 25 targeted damage for free so long as you actually kill the unit. And then it's attuned. So with minimal investment, you can be killing frontline tanks with it in no time. A single +10, for example, brings that all the way up to 75 damage. As much as I hate nerfs, and would always rather buff other cards to solve problematic cards, or basically design counter cards in a later set or a later patch, to counteract that problematic card, specifically in a player versus player type of game, even I think that this spell could probably be toned down some. Between the cost, the damage, and the attunement, I think it's just way too good, and you have to really justify yourself not picking it. Even if you already start with 2 and you come up with another one, a third Shenanigans is never going to hurt you. It's only going to make you even better. So let's move on to the uncommons. From a game design perspective, uncommons are where your basic theme starts to branch out into specific archetypes and become refined. Excuse me. It's also where you generally want to find answers to specific in-run problems, such as the case with Party Cannon here on page 2. It's a frontline tank buster, 60 damage with attunement. And also a top floor divinity or possibly even seraph solution with its days. So other tank busting solutions include buck off, and interrogation, which are pretty standard kill or weaken the meat wall utility spells. The herd theme is continued with my favorite uncommon in the set, spontaneous song and dance. And quite frankly, I'm going to call it one of the best spells in Monster Train because it's both survivability and scaling in one. It's floor-wide, and it doesn't consume. All you got to do is get 4 units on the floor, which should be trivial in the Equestrian clan. So, moving on. Fan Club here and VIP list give you more options for getting units on the floor. First Aid and Spa treatment here are worth noting because on the surface they're survivability options, but when Snack-a-Smacky is on your floor, particularly if Snack-a-Smacky is your primary unit, that's also scaling. And in the case of Spa treatment, that's 3 scaling per spell, and that is frankly super good. So the only other spell that really deserves comment here is Blank Flank. Blank Flank is technically another answer type spell, but it's also frankly insane. You may recall one particular run where I used it to get rid of Heartless on my units, which allowed me to use Changeling Infiltration, we'll talk more on that later, to duplicate Guardian of the Gates a bunch of times and fill the floor. It might as well read Crystal Cloak dies here on the flavor text. And it trivializes armor-based mini-bosses and heavy units. And, to top everything else off, it's free. Once again, as adverse as I am to nerfs, and I am really adverse, this one could probably be toned down as well, I think. Okay, on to the rares. In card game design, the purpose of rare cards is to provide that sense of excitement when you crack the pack and see it, or when you draft it, or when it shows up in your run. It's there for impact and to help you win, honestly. You can't build an archetype around it because of its rarity, but given the opportunity to see 3 of them twice in a run at minimum, you should find at least one that will help you win. Of the rares, the one I want to talk about most is Elements of Harmony, because it doesn't look like it should be rare. The power level certainly meets the criteria, but given its role in the theme, if I were designing the card in a vacuum, I would make it more expensive, probably 2 cost, and make it an uncommon. However, there is a mitigating factor here, and that factor is its inclusion in the clan-specific Cavern event. Having it potentially available as early as Ring 3 still gives it time to be built around, and either turbocharge an already herd-focused deck, or allow a pivot into a herd-focused deck. For this reason, I really like its inclusion at the rare level at a cost of 1. So if there's one that's probably overpowered, it would be Changeling Infiltration. I was going to look at One Horn's Tome, but nah. I think if you're listening to this, you know what One Horn's Tome is. So compare it to One Horn's Tome, which gives a unit multi-strike at the cost of becoming fragile at 5 Ember. Changeling Infiltration gives the same multi-strike by duplicating the unit, buffs and all, at the cost of 3 Ember and shutting off the healing spigot. I would argue that this is probably more evidence that One Horn's Tome is overcosted, but Changeling Infiltration is much easier to exploit than One Horn's Tome, thanks to the inclusion of Blank Flank in the clan. Nonetheless, as much as an instant must-pick as it appears to be, I don't think I'd change it. In a world where Transcendimp exists, I think it's fine as it is. Equestrian Real Spike and Second Chance are interesting to me in that they are both solutions to in-run thematic building issues. If you're having trouble making herd work, or the friendship theme in general, either of these cards can help you solve that, and Second Chance is also an interesting Seraph the Patient solution. Now, on to the 3 that I actually haven't played. Tom strikes me as odd, because I would think that given the number of attuned spells in clan, that Tom would be too. Admittedly, I had to read the flavor text here to understand why a spell was named Tom, so, that's a thing. Nonetheless, given that it's floor-wide damage, that a plus 10 and piercing with holdover will essentially win runs by itself, which it's going to have to, given that a holdover add a deadweight card to your deck card's eventually going to make mandatory, because you're going to draw nothing but deadweights. I think it certainly belongs at rare. I've never had call to use it. Alicornification is really good, and requiring Herd 7 is fair. The 5 cost is a problem, however, because it basically means if you don't see it on the Ring 3 boss, then you're not really going to have sufficient time to build around it in run to meet that 5 Ember cost. And that's pretty much the only reason I never picked it, because as a rare card, my run was usually already solved by the time I saw it, never having seen it on Ring 3, and I didn't have the room to build around it for something that I honestly didn't need all that bad. Now, if there's a single card in the Equestrian clan that I think needs help, it's Rainbow Power. It costs 3, requires Herd 6, and here's the problem: it purges. I cannot envision a scenario where you're successfully getting 6 units on the floor that you need 6 instances of 6 damage to the entire floor bad enough that you will spend 3 Ember and purge it. It's attuned, so with a little bit of investment it can do the same damage as an Inferno without the drawback of Inferno, but Are you really going to want to invest in a card that purges? About the only scenario I can come up with is that I'm really worried specifically about the Harvest Wave on Divinity, and Rainbow Power is the only solution I've got for it. But even that's a stretch. There's no reason for it to purge when consume is sufficient. Sure, you can remove the consume, but that takes a slot and increases the card by 1, all but requiring the second slot to be spent on a cost reduction. There's nothing game-breaking about that. So, buff Rainbow Power. If you're listening ThreeFishies, buff Rainbow Power. Okay, I want to talk artifacts now, because before we conclude this review, it would be disrespectful to talk about this clan without including the full breadth of work that ThreeFishies put into it. Assuming it has 11 artifacts like all the other clans, I've encountered them all. And they're all good. Like Wormkin artifacts level good. I'm just going to go down the line. A Child's Drawing guarantees +4 Ember on turn 1 and flushes 3 units out of your deck. Early game, that means you get those Train Stewards out of your draws, and in late game, that accelerates your social engine. Of all the Equestrian artifacts, Bloomberg is arguably the weakest, forcing a large stone into the unit's first slot. But when you're drafting multiple units with the intent to play every single one of them, you're not going to be able to fill in all those slots. And though it still requires a social or an overstacking engine to fully utilize, it's still a huge leap in survivability for your line. Bottled Cutie Mark is a self-contained social engine. Nice, simple, powerful. Imaginary Friends enables Tantabus decks specifically, and certain Mariali decks, to utilize herd spells that it otherwise couldn't. Junk Food is basically Impsicle for ponies. That's all there is to say about that. Mare in the Moon is stupid good if you have a champion that's killing on the regular. The wording on it is really weird, but it basically means, and we found this out through science, that any unit that your champion kills, with the exception of those that are killed with a specific ability, heals your pyre. As we saw in my Nightmare Cannabis run, that can be some crazy serious healing. Royal Scroll lets you lead off the turn with powerful, costly spells for free. It has a really bizarre feeling and interaction with Volatile Gauge, or not Volatile Gauge, with, well, I mean, it makes Volatile Gauge sing, but Split Anvil, specifically the one I was thinking of, because it hides your spell costs, and it makes it a little bit trickier to play. And same deal with Volatile Gauge. It hides your spell costs. It means you're guaranteed to play 1 that you drew from your Volatile Gauge. Well, 2 guaranteed. But you can whiff really bad with Volatile Gauge with Royal Scroll. But outside the context of Volatile Gauge or Split Anvil, Royal Scroll, it's just good. There's nothing more to say about it. Strange Golden Rod is basically a free remove consume for the first consume spell that you play every single turn. Changeling Infiltration? Anyone? Oh boy, and then their 7th element. What do I say about this? Have you ever wondered what it would be like to combine Ashes of the Fallen, Founding Seal, Waxer Snuffer, Fossilized Fangs, and probably a bunch of other artifacts I'm not thinking of right now, into a single artifact, and then make it even more powerful? Yeah, that's the 7th element. It's basically the highly reactive mutator for all of your social units, and that is insane. Tiny Mouse Wheelchair is definitely the most situational, but it turns regen into heal some and then +5 armor. With as many ways as the Equestrian clan has of giving the entire floor regen, that adds up to some serious survivability. And last, but certainly not least, is the Torn Lapel Pin. It locks merchant removal services and duplication services, if you're running a particular mutator, into whatever cost they are when you pick up the artifact. You get this early enough in a run, and you can purge pretty much anything you want in that run. It is super good. So, I had a lot of fun with this custom clan. And though I don't know what the future of it will be on this channel, you certainly haven't seen the last of it. Unlike some other custom clans, I think it holds up very well at Covenant 25, and maybe I'll add them to the Rotating Random series at some point. I definitely think the clan is good enough to warrant that inclusion. Like I said earlier, this is DLC quality content. At some point, I'd like to go through those expert challenges in the same vein as my Easy Expert Challenges series with front-loaded optimization. So that may be in the future too. So, final thoughts. If you've never played this clan because you dislike the My Little Pony series, or for honestly any reason you haven't played this clan, give it a shot. I think you're missing out on a really fun, enjoyable, and innovative Monster Train experience. That's all for me today, YouTube neighbors. Thank you for joining me. I will see you next time.